investing for the unpredictable. Today's show, our guest speaker is Brad Blazar. And I'll let Brad take it from here.
All righty. Thank you, Chantel. It's great to be here with y'all. My name is Brad Blazar, two-time author, speaker, and coach, and creator of a coaching program called Capital School, where we basically teach entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs how to attract, how to raise investor capital so they can build, buy, or scale the business, or maybe just fund a special project like a real estate transaction.
I want to ask a question too about real estate. I think what happens in real estate is that if you haven't had a lot of exposure, sometimes people start too small. Mm-hmm. I grew up in real estate. My parents owned apartment buildings. They owned courtyard buildings where you'd be at 20 units in the courtyard.
Sure.
Yeah. So I had to learn how to paint and so forth growing up. Yeah. But I think that a lot of times when people think of buying real estate, they start sometimes in the worst communities and too small. Mm-hmm. And is that dealing with fear again when that happens? Because you can't turn, what is it, a silk purse out of a sow's ear, they used to say, but something of that nature.
Yeah, but I think largely it's, they start too small and, they're investing in properties really that aren't going to offer the significant appreciation. I always have been a believer that, you can buy a single family house and then buy a third, or you can go straight to buy a fourplex and have one property where you've got 4 streams of income, 4 checks coming in every month. Well, I would much rather just go to one location and be able to collect 4 checks than have to go to one house and then maybe drive 45 minutes to another property and then drive across town to another. Now, unless you're focused on one area and you build your strategy around that so that, all of the houses you're going to own are within a geographic region, that's largely what I see a lot of real estate investors do. And then it just becomes so problematic. They're getting calls from tenants, hey, the water heater went out, or hey, we got a backed up commode. And, when you have to start meeting people that are caring for your properties, like plumbers or electricians or painters, you literally could spend an entire day just going to 3 properties that you've got scattered across town, especially if you live in a large city like Chicago or, Houston or Dallas. But imagine if you just had a little 12-unit apartment building and every month you're getting 12 checks from 12 people that live in that one building. It's a much easier business model. And it's, of course, a lot less risky because even if 2 of the 12 apartments are not rented, more than likely you're still able to cover your debt service and pay your mortgage and cover expenses and still put some money in your pocket. But when you've got a small little rental house, and that house is vacant, if you still have a mortgage that you have to pay, that's a big burden to a lot of people. And so I feel that for many reasons, multifamily and investing in small properties like that is a much safer route. But I always recommend to people, get some training, read some books, Google some stuff to really learn about this so that you're not making costly mistakes. Because in real estate, mistakes, of course, can be costly. There are plenty of mentors out there, much like myself. I teach, of course, how to raise capital, how to attract investors. I have many friends that are very successful coaches in multifamily or in how to rehab or how to wholesale. And so once you get plugged into my network and we sit down and we kind of have a strategy call and largely determine what it is you want to do, we can then really work with you to build a plan and build a strategy that is almost going to ensure success as long as you put forth the effort and action on your side of the equation and are willing to hold yourself accountable.
One last question before we wrap up here. I always heard about location. How important is that when you're buying real estate?
It's everything. It is everything. I can't reiterate how important that is. I would rather buy a older property that has deferred maintenance, that needs an investment, has neglected it in a great location, because then I can go in and make a small investment with some paint and basically, as I say, put a little lipstick on it and then sell it because of the locational qualities. Location is everything in real estate. As a matter of fact, I used to work for a company here in Houston that grew to become a multi-billion-dollar company. Their stock was traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And the chairman and founder of that company believed that in every major city, there were certain locations that were far more valuable than any other location in town. And he actually came up with a term that they've trademarked called irreplaceable corners. And what those corners largely were the traffic corners that sat at major intersections, either in front of large malls or large strip centers, knowing that those corners would always have the highest visibility. And so being in commercial real estate and knowing that visibility was key amongst restaurants and things like that, they were able to build a global platform and buy these locations that were in such demand because of the locational qualities. And so when you look at real estate, understand that location is everything. Waterfront property demands a much higher price, of course, than property that's not on a water, even if it's a river or even if it's a pond. And so largely you have to look at these things, proximity to great schools, proximity to things that certain people are going to want to look for at different stages in their life. But really, it all comes down to that location, location, location.
You've covered a lot of material here. I'm an awful lot. I'm really very happy. I think that my audience is as well, because they're going to learn a lot from you. And want to mention anything else before we wrap up here today?
Well, let me cover one other aspect of the coaching program that we have, because we spent such a lot of time today really talking about, raising capital and, of course, what we offer. We run a parallel coaching program alongside that called Build Your Beast, where really it's more of a mindset. It's really a program designed for people that want to aspire to a higher level of success. And what I've largely found working with entrepreneurs and working with people is they get to a point where they feel they've plateaued or maybe they feel stuck. And that's largely because we internally have lost our drive. We've lost our desire. We've lost our mojo, whatever word you want to attach to it. And usually it takes an external force to help somebody kind of flip that switch. And the way that I explain this when I'm speaking on stage is I'll ask, a large audience of people, how many of you here feel that there is another gear inside you that you could be operating at that just ain't been activated? In other words, when you show up to work, you could be putting in more. When you're doing this, you could be doing it with greater intensity. And invariably, everybody's hand, goes up. And I believe largely the reason that everybody's hand goes up is we as humans are basically designed to default to a place of comfort. When most of our comforts are met, i.e. a roof over our head with a nice home and a car that we can drive and the ability to pay for nice meals and put food on the table, we've lost the hustle because we no longer have to go out every day and hunt. And there's a term that we use to describe this called prey drive. And what I have found basically is that if you look at like dogs, or you look at large cats like lions, tigers, they have this innate ability where they chase. They see something and boom, they chase it. Well, think of your goals the same way. If your goals are what you're chasing, most people aren't chasing their goals. I mean, 87% of our population don't even have goals written down on paper, which is a very important step. But once you understand that you can look to your future and see a bigger, greater potential, and then focus on that and activate what I call that prey drive, it's then just a matter of blocking out the naysayers and not listening to your inner fears and just putting one foot in front of the other every day until those dreams or those goals become reality. And that's largely what I've seen in many, many people, is kind of this transformation and this understanding once they buy into this concept that we've trademarked, which is called beliefology. And the art of beliefology is a trademark concept that simply says, if you change your beliefs, you can change your life. Because the reality of our life is largely defined by our belief system, and many of our beliefs are not true. They're put there by people that loved us in our childhood or as we were growing up, saying, well, don't do this. There's risk to that. And so over time, as you've heard those things multiple times, you don't do them. And so a lot of people, for example, that, have a corporate job with a 401k and paid insurance would never think about quitting that and starting a business, because they've heard all their life and all their career, their safety and security in working for a big company. True, but if you look at corporate America, many people that have corporate jobs are dead broke. They don't save, and they make $60,000, $80,000 a year, but they haven't accumulated wealth. And so I tell people, you're going to get to a point later in life where you don't want to have regret. I talk to many people that are in their 60s that look back on life and say, I have regrets that I didn't do something bigger with my life. I coulda, I shoulda, but I never did. And I tell people, when you get into your late 60s or 70s, do you want to get to a point where you're sitting there going, man, I guess this is all there is for me? Or do you want to take that little bit of risk and really do something that could change things dramatically, not just for you, but create generational wealth? And that's largely what we find as we talk to students, is they want that, they just don't know how to get that. And so that's a lot of what we coach on in our other program that we focus on, called Build Your Beast.
We got a few minutes here left. Let me go over one point here. Because you mentioned even 60s or 70s, would you say there's an age limit, or is there no age limit to how people change their lives?
There's really no age limit. I've seen people in their 60s and 70s do dramatic things. One of my very good friends, a gentleman by the name of Greg Paul, who has summited Mount Everest, and he's the only person that ever reached the summit with 2 artificial knees. He climbed to the summit of Mount Everest at the age of 62 with 2 artificial knees, and he made it on his 5th attempt. In other words, it took him 5 times up and down the mountain over 5 separate years. And one of the years he was there was 2014, when they experienced the worst avalanche in the history of Mount Everest, and it killed 16 people. And he was only 1,000 yards away from this huge avalanche coming down the mountain. And he saw all the snow, and he saw all the tents and everything just get taken away. And I said, Greg, I mean, with you sitting there literally 1,000 yards from where that happened, realizing that could have been you, what in the world were you thinking to go back there the following year and try to do it again, knowing you could have been killed? He said it was a goal. He said, I wanted to prove to my grandchildren that once they have a goal, they never have to give up. And I largely proved to them and the rest of the world, and of course to myself, that even at the age of 62 with 2 artificial knees, there is the will and desire, you can make it to the top of the world. And he's just one of the many stories that I love to show that there really is no age. You look at people like Jack LaLanne, Jack LaLanne was in his 80s, and he's, a fitness guru, and he's doing things that most people in their 60s cannot even fathom, swimming the English Channel, but doing it, pulling a rowboat behind him, holding the rope in his teeth, and just, feats of strength. So I tell people, where there's desire and where there's a will, it really doesn't matter on the age. Doesn't matter in your 40s, whether you're in your 60s. I believe that somebody can always be doing bigger things with their life.
What about how young? Is there a too early age?
Not really. I see kids that are in their teens that are starting businesses and having massive success. Age really should never be a barrier. I mean, I love one of the episodes of Shark Tank, where we have, little kids in their teens, and they started businesses and they're getting deals with sharks. I mean, imagine, 18-year-old that has a little side hustle business, and all of a sudden now you're doing business with someone like Mark Cuban or Damon John, just because you have that drive and you have that determination. So really, age is really not a barrier. It really comes down to confidence and how you project and how you articulate, and largely how you carry yourself. That is largely going to determine your success in life. I mean, it gets down to one of my favorite lines that Zig Ziglar always used to say, and his line was, your attitude determines your altitude. And if you remember that, that's largely what a lot of life is based on. It's your attitude and how you think about certain things. You can look at failure as failure, or you can look at failure the way a lot of successful people do, and that is simply learn from it and realize that failure is good, because you now have just learned another way that doesn't work. And so the next day you go out and you try something new that hopefully will. And so it's just largely how you look at certain things in your life that are setbacks that are going to hopefully allow you to grow.
Brad, I want to thank you for the time you spent with us today. I am so impressed. And I want you to repeat again how people can reach you. And I'm going to print that out at the end of this so they have
absolutely. The website that you would want to go to is just my name, www.bradblazar. It's spelled BRADBLAZ like zebra, AR. And you'll see information there on my books. I've got, of course, the 2 books that you can find on Amazon. The very first book, called On the Wings of Eagles, Learn to Soar, was rated as a #1 top rated read for young entrepreneurs and for business owners by a major literary blog. And really what that book is, it's a compilation of stories taken from some of the most famous people that I've either heard speak or that I've worked with or been around, people like Kevin O'Leary, people like George W. Bush, people like Joe Namath, Rudy Rudiger, Irving Magic Johnson. And so you're not only learning from me, you're sharing some of the stories and insights from some of these great thought leaders. And then, of course, my podcast, if you like listening to some of these big business podcasts, my business podcast you can find on our website. It's called Beast Nation. And it's the 2nd highest rated show, according to Yahoo Finance and Yahoo News, to help people cope with COVID. And I think it's largely because of the big thought leaders and the big business leaders that we bring onto the show that people just love hearing from. So that's largely how you find me. You can find me on Instagram, Brad Blazar. So, follow me, DM me, and I would love to offer anybody that is one of your listeners a free 30-minute strategy call just to talk about their situation, kind of where they are in life, where they like to go, and see if there's any tools or things that we might be able to bring to the table for them to largely help them bridge that gap.
And one other thing, Brad, I'd like to make sure I can invite you back for another show because I am enjoying this so much. Would you mind being a guest star in the future? Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for today, and I want to thank our audience for showing up.
Thank you so much, Chantel, for having me. Thank you so much. I'm very humbled.
Thank you. That's a wrap.